Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's YouTube live stream for Fusion 360. I'm Wayne Griffenberg. I'm a technical specialist on the Fusion 360 team. Today on the keyboards, we have Devin Depew, another master technical specialist at Fusion 360 team. He's awesome. And we're here on the cam side to get you guys some more information behind Fusion 360. Tune in with us. All week we have live streams going for electronics, for our hangout on Fridays with Al and CJ, and on Tuesdays we have our technical dives, deep dives with Jason Lickman and Tyler Kakara, myself, and we also have Brad Tallis on Thursday. So you're going to see us do a lot of these live streams to answer questions for you guys each week. We do them live so you can ask questions. And again, we have Devin on the keys, so please feel free ask any questions as we go through, and stay tuned. We have a lot more coming in the month of May. So I'd like to just jump right in and talk about using animations to help with your manufacturing process. Um, there are places where we can do some search. There hasn't been a whole lot covering animation in Fusion 360. I think it's a very powerful workspace, one that seems to be underused these days, and I'd like to walk you through what that looks like to be able to even set up an animation video that will help you with your, if you have new users or maybe even new operators at your machines, and you'd like to walk them through how to set up your vices, set up the parts in there, and do it accurately, and perhaps that you want to use it as a training workflow. And we actually had some newer members of our sales team who volunteered to help over the past few years, in fact, last year, with the Haas demo days. Right, so across the U.S., Haas does their demo days in the spring, and we help them with setup with different machines like a Haas VF2s and the turning, the mill turn machines as well. And our team is there to help and to talk about Fusion and set up some machines. So we made some videos to help walk through exactly how to do that, to how to put in new stock, take the old stock out, tighten it up, close the doors, of course, spray off all the chips, and be able to run the machine and how to program it. So what I'd like to do is kind of walk you through a process where we did a video similar to like this one, which was actually playing on the Haas Next Generation control, where you can replay and show how we did this setup to be able to take the parts out. This is the Haas bottle opener that we did last year. Take the part out, be able to flip the part from the first stage to the second stage, and how to drop in new stock. And this is all done inside of Fusion 360. It's done on your data sets as they are. So if anything changes, you change your soft jaws, or if you change the part itself, it updates in your animation workspace, and you could show this right on the screen. Right, so let's walk through. I'd like to give you guys some background and step by step on how you could set something like that up in your workflow. Right, so we're going to get started. Just a few things about the animation workflow. It's essentially now when we think of animation, right? We want to make a character move around and jump on the screen like a video game, or what we can do with like tools like Maya and 3ds Max inside of Autodesk. Now, the animation that we have inside of Fusion isn't really for that photorealistic rendering. It's not really for doing that type of animation. It's mainly for showing people how your design operates or how to assemble or disassemble your different components, right? Used to help support manufacturing, and that's really what we have animations for. And a note to keep in mind, this is really for working with assembly components, right? Not for part body. So if you have a multi-body part, animation won't really work for you because it doesn't let you move those parts around freely. And also, just to let you know, our output in the end is an AVI file, which can be brought into other movie editors to make it a little bit more professional, where you can add things like callouts and you can add transitions between your steps in your animation. But just to cover those. And outside of that, we're able to work with a nice workflow to be able to get that out for your part. So let's do that. Let's do it live. I'm going to walk through with you guys directly inside of Fusion 360, and we're going to go through. I'm going to take you step by step on making an animation like the one you just saw, and how to do it in the animation workspace using a design that we have here. Now, this one was all set up. This was done a little while ago. I know Tim Paul on the team developed and made some bottle openers for different machines like Mitsura and as other types of machines as well. And we simplified the design, and we're able to use this. This is like a Haas data set for the Haas demo days. And to walk through, we actually have all this set up. So just like you work in your design, and if you update your design, it'll update, if you're doing generative design, rendering, we're going to talk about our animation today. But if you're doing some simulation or even doing your toolpath, the same way that you would set up and output your toolpath within Fusion 360 is exactly the same workflow. Like if you change it, it updates all your toolpaths. The same workflow we go through is going to be setting up animations as well, right? So let's jump into that. So I'm going to go into the Animation Workspace, right? And then you can see here I have a machine set up, right? So this is like the default. If I start to play through, I'm going to explain what you see on the bottom, but it's going to walk through that same video. You can see it playing on our timeline, right? So on the bottom of the screen there is our timeline, and it plays through on seconds of the timeline, and you can see the different motion. This is capturing the video screen, and down here we have different motion like rotation, moving the parts, and it's basically stepping through like you're the director of the movie. You get to decide exactly what turns on at which time, and visibility and so forth, and moving your components around. So let's take a tour step by step through this process. Right, so we're going to make a new storyboard. So on the bottom left here, you see these are storyboards, and I can jump from different storyboards. Maybe I have an operation in mind, and I can kind of walk through on one storyboard. And if I want to do something a little bit different, maybe I did a couple steps in here that were kind of herky jerky, and maybe I want to try it in a different way, I can make a brand new storyboard and kind of walk through it. Right, so let's do that process together. One note I wanted to add is in the design, I have this set up where you saw I have a whole machine in here, right? So, and I also have the enclosure for the machine as well. And you could find machines online, right? So if you take a look for Haas, if you have a Haas machine and you want to look on their website, you could jump into their website. Let me bring this up real quick. Let me look here. So that's all of our YouTube live videos coming up. And so if you look at like Haas, if you do a search, you could find that Haas offers some downloads that you could find for their machine. So if you're running a VF2 or maybe a drill mill, you could find models of your machine that you can use for assemblies that I have in the background. Right, so they're all built. They're pretty easy to work through those models, and you can also look on sites like GrabCAD. Right, so in GrabCAD, you could do a search in here for CNC machines, and you could find they have a lot of different machines that you can download that match what you guys are working with. Right, so sometimes they can be STL models, they can be step models, IGES, or specific CAD, and you might even find Fusion 360 models already to make it easy. There's other places like TurboSquid where you can download 3D models. Now these aren't for free, but if you have a subscription and you already work with TurboSquid, you could find these models as well. So in this case, I happened to download some models from the Haas site, and I was able to incorporate them into our design here. Now, you don't need all the models to be able to program and work with your CAM workflow, but for animations, it might be helpful to show as we go through and show you how to open up the doors and such on the machine. So let's do that. So I'm going to go into our animation workflow. We're going to start a brand new storyboard. Right down here, we're going to add a storyboard. And it asks you, do you want to start a clean storyboard or do you want to start from the previous storyboard? So you can do this, right? So if you leave off where you left, maybe I set it up where you could set up the stock, then we do a machining operation. Now we want to come back and do it the second side of that part. We can come in and start from where we left off previously. In this case, I'm going to start with a clean setup. And now I have a clean setup here. Now, I can move this. This is called, it's our animation head, right? So this is like, a place where we can put throughout time, 1 second, 2 second, you can move this throughout your animation. Now, there's a place here where you see that little red marker, right? This is our scratch zone. This is where it's not going to record anything. Like you could do your preparatory work in here, and it's not going to start to record your screen, right? So this is a place where you can set it up. So in our timeline, I'm going to start to create different views. So I also want to be able to zoom this out, and now I want to have an initial setting for this machine. So I can expand down the different components. Now remember, you need components in an assembly for the animation to work. It doesn't work with multi-body models. So you have to turn it into an assembly with components inside. So in here I have our Haas VF2 model that we downloaded, and we could turn on different features, right? So I can start turning on the doors, I could turn on the enclosure assembly, and if we want, we can even turn on our tool changer in there, right? So it's your preference. We can turn those off to make it a little bit easier to view. And so that I'm going to start in this initial view like this. Notice we're still in our scratch area here, our scratch zone, but I'm going to start to drag this out because I want to start to zoom in to that area. Now notice when I drag out to 1 second, and I can change this up here. I can grab my view cube and change it to the front view. And you see it just recorded our view, that shift in view. So if I roll this back in time, you see it go back to our initial position. And if I start playing through, it already animated 1 second of repositioning that model. Now I'm using a 3D mouse, so I can move this freely, but you can also do your live orbit by clicking your middle mouse button and your shift key, and you can start to zoom into the model. And that's what I want to do here. Let's say we're going to take 2 seconds. Right, I'm going to move the marker up to 3. I'm going to use my 3D mouse. I'm going to zoom into where those doors are. Right, so I want to stop like right about there, and I want to animate those doors opening. Right? So, but keep in mind, it kept that history, right? It recorded everything I did in moving it in to that position there, right? So now I'd like to open up the doors. So I'm going to do a position move, right? So I can go up here and say move. I want to transport or transform components. I could simply go into here and I can select this door, like our left door, and I can start to reposition it, right? So I'm going to zoom just out just for a second, and I can start to set a pivot if I want to rotate the door. I can, put in some distances in here. I can also have a trail line. So if you're doing an assembly with an explode, you can have a trail line behind it. So I'm just going to start to grab the door and we're going to move it back like 18 inches, right? So if I want, I can even plug in here exactly. I want to go 18.0 and it moves 18 inches. Simultaneously, I'd like to open this door as well. So I'm just going to select that door and we're going to move that at the same time, right? And we can also move that exactly 18 inches. So I'm going to say OK, and you see it recorded during that move, it recorded the moves for our door. There's our left door and our right door. And if I roll back in time, you can see as we're zooming in, it opened up those doors, right? Because I did it at the same time. Let me click so you don't see that door highlighted. And now you can see as I play through, as we zoom in, it's going to have the doors open up for us. Now, maybe I don't want the doors opening automatically. Maybe I want them to open after I move to that position, right? So I could take these doors and I can hold Control. I'm going to select those moves and move it to the end. Right? So I'm going to position it right there. So now if I roll this back and we play, we could see that it's going to now move into position and then it's going to open up the doors. Right? And if you want one door to open first, you just simply grab one of these moves and slide it over. And now we're going to have the left door open first, then the right door. Right? So things like this you can easily do within your animation. Let me click in here so we don't highlight. And then we can play through. Oh, give it a second to update. Come on, Fusion, update for me. And then I'm able to go and move these around. We're going to play through that animation. You can see it's going to open up the left door and then the right door. So it's really up to you as the director how you want to show those different moves in those positions. Now the next transition I'd like to do is I want to move inside the machine. And as I'm moving inside, right, so right now it's not going to move, it's going to keep that position. I'd like to make a change real quick without it recording. Right? So maybe I want to turn these off or I want to position something really quick. I can always stop our view from recording and I can pause it. So I can make things move around, I can make things disappear in the interim. And I'll show you this in just a second. Then I can start recording again. Let's show you that in a minute. So I'm going to roll this forward up to, let's say, 9 seconds into our video. And I want to start to move in to the part. And along the way, I want the enclosure to disappear, right? So I'm going to stop here for a second. It recorded that motion, but now I want the rest of the enclosure to disappear during that time. So while I move back to this position, I can go into our Haas, right? And I can say I want to move halfway through as it gets closer and closer. I want the Z-axis to turn off just for this video. Maybe I want the enclosure and the two doors to turn off halfway through. And now you see we have these vision markers right here. These are actually visibility markers. And those different components that I'm using to turn off, we're actually making them disappear during that transition, right? So now we could take this, and if you want it to fade, you can grab this little end here and you can have it fade out, right? And the same thing here, I can grab these. You can also hold control and grab these additional ones like this. And let me grab this bottom one, and I want those to fade. I just grab this little end, and I want it to fade out till that 9-second marker. So now if we go back, let me hit escape. And now if I go back in time and I start to play through that animation, right? So let me go into here and play. And you can see as we start to zoom in towards our model, it fades away. Now the rest of our enclosure is not in the way, so I can show more clearly and focus in on exactly what I'd like to show on the vise. Right, so now let's do this. The next step would be, okay, I want to be able to show what the important part is that on this 5th axis vise, I have it rotated around. So as I zoom in, I'm going to pause for a second. I want to zoom into this front view, and I want to be able to show that open going clockwise, right? So I want our teams to be able to see that. Let me roll back to where I left off, right? So right in here, and then we're going to start our capture view again. And now I'm going to zoom into the front, right? So I can even do this. Let's say we go up to 11 seconds. I'm going to push to the front, and I'm going to move this up towards us, and we're going to look at it from the front view. So now it recorded that motion up here, right? So I can roll this back in time, and I can see there's a period where we stop, and it's going to face the front of the part. Now I want to leave that on for a second, just so people can get a glimpse of I'm pointing at this open. And now I want to zoom back out, right? So now I'm going to take this marker and we're going to start to zoom back out, right? So now let's go from here, right? I'm going to pause that in a second there, and we're going to go back out for 2 seconds. I'm going to zoom back out, and it's recording what we're doing. And now I want to show the wrench going in, and I want to turn the wrench on to turn this clockwise, right? So now if I turn the wrench on, I'm going to pause for a second. Now if I turn this wrench on, this ratchet, see, it's in position here, but I want to show it turned on, visibility, and then moving into position. So while I have it paused, I'm going to move that wrench out of the way. We're going to leave it kind of like a little bit off screen. And I want it to appear at that point, right? So at this point going forward, I want this to just show up here, right? So I'm going to hide visibility. We're going to start our recording, and now I'm going to move this forward for, let's say, 1 second. And now I'm going to turn on visibility. Right? We can see that visibility. Let's move it back a little bit, right? So I want to fade in at that point. And now I have our wrench fading in. And now for another second, I want to move it into position, right? So I'm going to select our move. We're going to drag this up, and I'm just going to eyeball it. If you know exactly what that distance was that we dragged it, we could just put that back in to there, right? Um, so let's go and now that's what I'm looking for is the wrench to move in position. And now I want to rotate it, let's say, 150 degrees to the right, to go positive, right? So now I'm going to move up ahead in time. And now while I have it highlighted, we're going to now rotate this around, let's say up to about 150 degrees. And at the same time, when that's rotating, and I'm going to kind of like, not really cheat, but I'm going to move this in a little bit. But I want to show this that now we can also move our Vise Jaw out, let's say a negative 1/4 inch. And then at the same time, I want this Vise Jaw to move out. I'm only doing this for the principle of animation, right? So we'll make this a 1/4 inch as well. So now normally you'd have to ratchet a little bit for that thing to move out to that position, but for animation wise, that's going to work for us. Now notice it gave us our rotation for the wrench, and down below it's also giving us our position. Oh, give it a second update. It's also giving us our move position for those vice jaws that we just moved out. So I'd like to actually have this set up a little bit. So there's our move for the wrench. Notice the ratchet now has a few things, visibility added, it has our rotation added, and it has our move added, right? So if we move this out a little bit, I'm going to move these as well because I want the motion and the ratchet rotation all to be in one smooth flow. So if I roll this back in time and I start to play through, and you'll see this will also jump through, right? So now I have the the wrench appearing. Oops, let me back up. Let me undo real quick for a second. I'm going to undo this. There we go. So now I have my position marker. Let's go and redo it. So I have my position marker there, and we could zoom in and we could say, okay, I want to play through. I want to see what that's going to look like, right? So actually, I kind of went back in time for the whole animation. This is actually a good idea to go back and see where you're at. And if there's any places you want to make some changes in the past, like that kind of snapped there really quick. There's our wrench moving in, and you can see our jaws moving out. All right, so now we're at this position where we opened up the jaws, and now I want to be able to take the part out of the machine, right? So we can walk through that outside there as well, right? So let's say now I want to take this part and we want to lift it up, right? So that's the part we're going to remove from the machine. That's what we want the operator to do. So I'm going to transform that. So before I do, let's go and move this marker up, and I'm going to go up to like 19. And then we're going to move this component. Just going to grab a hold of it and move it up like, let's say, -3 inches. And now we have that part moving up. And up until about 21, we're going to take this part while we still have it highlighted. We're going to transition it basically off the screen, right? And while I have it transitioning off the screen, I can also hide visibility of that opener, right? So now it's off the screen. It's invisible. We're recording all that as it happened. Now, I probably would want to take our wrench out before I did that, so that's okay. I can go back in time, but let's take our wrench and take that out as well, right? So I can move the wrench while we're here, the ratchet, move that off. Actually, let me go this. Let me cancel that for a second because I want to do that in time. So now I'm going to take our wrench while we have it highlighted, and we're going to move that off the screen. And again, we're also going to take our ratchet and then have that dissolve off the screen. So we're going to move another second in time. And now I want to lift this component, flip it over, and bring it into our view. Now before I do, I want to transition our view over so we can see a little bit more clearly what's happening. And now I'm going to move in time here, and we're going to raise that component up. Just select the component, lift it up. We're going to go up 3 inches. I think it's a good round number. Right? Transition another second. We're going to move it over to the other position. This one I remember from center to center on here, we actually have this move in 5.5 inches. So I'm going to -5.5 inches. That's the position I want it to. The next position move will be rotating it around 180 degrees. Right, so I'm just going to rotate this around 180. And then we're going to move another minute. So you're like the director. You're able to take the actors, and if you think of that point of view, of moving the actors where you want them, at what time, and what position they should be in. So now we've moved that position. The next step would be to bring in our stock. I'm going to pause it. I'm going to move up for a second, and I'm going to pause this for a second from recording. Because now if I turn on our stock, right, so up here, there's our first bottle opener, and I have a model in here I represent for stock, we could use that, right? That's our stock actually for the CAM workspace. This is the same stock we're going to use for the animation workspace. I can position it anywhere I want independently that the fact that the part it belongs to is moved 5 inches, 5.5 inches over, right? So now before I hit our view to start recording again, we're going to position this above, right? Let me move it up. We're going to position it 3 inches above. We can even go a little bit higher so we can, represent, we're putting this part in, so we'll go 4 inches above. Okay, now I'm going to start recording, and I want this to appear at this point, right? So if you look down here, this is where we actually moved it, but we didn't have any visibility during that time. We just turned on visibility at the end of that move, right? So that's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to start to record, but I want that visibility to kind of blend in, right? So in here, I'm going to move this marker up a little bit, but I'm going to change it back so it fades into place. So I'm going to fade that stock into this view, right? And we're going to start to record at that point, right? So now I hit my record on, roll this forward in time. I'll give it a second. It's going to catch up with us. They're going to roll it forward in time, and then at that moment, we're going to see our stock appear, right? Now it's just appearing into our view, and then I want to be able to move that stock into position, right? So now let's go and move it down. So I'm going to go up to do my transition. Let's move up to the next second or so, next second in our video. we're going to transition this stock down 4 inches. Now we placed it in the jaw. Now my next step would be, okay, now we have it there, but now I want to move it because now we have some more direction, right? So in the next transition, we'll take 2 seconds to get there, but I'd like to move this to the front. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to select the top, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit like this. Now it recorded that whole transition. So now what I'd like to do is I want to move that part into place, right, to load the stock in the corner top there, right? So now we're still recording in the view. I'm going to move this up another second, and now we're going to transition this. We're going to move that part up about a 1/4 inch, and now we're showing load stock at corner stop. An animation actually showing us how to load it in the corner stop. You can move it over, then up, right? And if you want to, you can add some annotation in here to say, we're using the cut side versus the saw cut side, right? So places like that, you can add some more direction. So now at this point in time, we now moved our part into place. I'm going to zoom back out. And actually, before I do, right, we're going to leave it right where it's at in that place. Again, I can select the top. We're zoomed in where we were. Now I can move this 2 seconds into the future. And now I'm going to zoom this thing out. And we're going to show our wrench coming back in to tighten up the vise. So hopefully this is kind of making some sense for you guys as we go through, and hopefully this is um, making, getting you guys more tuned in on what you can do using animations to help your operators out, or maybe even you use this for training or your standard operating procedures, walking through step by step and showing a video. Right, so if a picture's worth 1,000 words, a video is worth 10,000 words when showing how to set something up accurately. Right, so the next step is let's turn our wrench back on. So I'm going to go in time a little bit more. Let's say we go to 35 seconds or 36 seconds into the future. And now we're going to turn our ratchet back on. And I want to move that in position. We'll go up another 2 seconds. We'll grab our ratchet, right? And I want to transition our ratchet over into a position. Go up another few seconds, maybe another second or two. And now we can do that double transition we did before, right? So let's rotate this around, transform, rotate this. Let's say we go back another 170 degrees, right? So we can lock it there. 170.8 works for me. And at the same time, we want to move this jaw in by a 1/4 inch, right? Well, it looks like it's reaching pretty close to where I want it. We can move it up, wherever it's going to be. We'll grab this one. I don't think I had it in the right position to start with, but we're going to move this also a 1/4 inch this direction. And again, have your assembly set up exactly, where the components are going to be. And so at the same time, I'm going to say OK. So we have that transition recorded, rotation, and moving those jaws. Now, in this case, I'm going to actually shrink these up a little bit, right? So it's going to move a little bit faster in time, but I have that rotation and the synchronization of moving the jaws, right? And at this point, for the last second or so, we're going to move our wrench out of the way, right? So we're going to do a transition on our ratchet, move it out of the way, and then we can have it disappear at the end of that transition. And then we'll move up 2 seconds, and we're going to start to zoom out of our model, right? And then at this point, I'd like to bring our Haas back and we could show the door shutting, right? So if you want, you can have this transition. You can have these views fade in. There's the doors. There's the enclosure. There's our Z-axis, right? So we turn those visibility of those components back on. Again, you could fade them in if you'd like, right? And then say 2 seconds further in time, we're going to shut those doors, right? We're going to transition. We're going to go to move that left door, right? And again, like we did before, I could start moving this in a transition. I can also give it, 18, let's move it 18 inches this way. Same thing for the other door. We're going to go and move it 18 inches this way. Oops, did it grab? It's a little off my screen. And we're going to go 18 inches. Looks like I'm free moving it, so let me undo that real quick. And that's the cool thing too, like within Fusion, you can undo any of those moves, right? You can always get back to where you were, jump over here. Might have to move out in my transition a little bit, slide that over. And if you want, you can make that go 18, negative 18 inches, right? So it looks like I'm messing it up a little bit, but that's okay. I didn't do my left one, so we're going to go back in here. We'll do the left, right? So we'll move that another 18 inches. So just to give you an idea of ways that you can transition, and now at this another second later, we're going to go and move this back out, give it a second to catch up. And another second, maybe 2 seconds, we're going to zoom all the way out where we started. Or I could zoom into the control, right? So we could zoom up to the control, and then the next animation will be what do you punch in to run your program and so forth, if you wanted to add those. All right, so let's go back through everything we have. So I'm going to jump to the beginning, and we're going to play through. Now, the coolest thing is that, well, nothing's set in stone because you can always go back, make changes to your transitions, right? But getting to this point is pretty, straightforward workflow. There wasn't really a whole bunch we had to go and set up. If we want to pause, we can turn on different components. And there's our wrench. Maybe I won't have that transition all the way out, right? Maybe I'll go back and change that the camera transition to be a little bit closer. Right there, we're dropping our stock, we're moving it, loading it into that stop area, and we're going to come back and we're going to tighten it back up. Right, so, and then zoom out. We have our enclosure coming back into the fold. And again, you can transition that so it kind of blends really nicely. And now we transition to our control to go in there and start plugging in the program. So that was a workflow, getting from start to finish, going through and making a video. If we like the storyboard, you can keep the storyboard. They get saved with your design. The best part of all this is if you ever go back up into your design, have to make a change in your design, right? So let's say we have a new part or we reposition, got to change our soft jaws. As life goes on and life changes, things change, right? Let's say, for instance, I'm going to make a very simple change, but we're going to do a press pull and we're going to change this dowel pin hole again, something like that on our fixture. I could change the part too. And let's say we save that change, and now that's something that's going to ripple through. And you think, well, I got to go back and update all my stuff and my animations and simulation and so forth. Well, you don't, because once you go back in, it's automatically part of your design. You can see as we go through and play, and as we transition through the video, you'll see now the jaw itself has been updated, right? Automatically. There's nothing you have to do. Even if it repositions something, you just go back in here and reposition it where you want to. Now it has that smaller pinhole on top, right? So it's live and it works with your design. So if you save this at Rev 15 in my case, we'll go up to Rev 16. At Rev 16, everything it is at that Rev is going to be within my assembly for my animation. So it's all integrated. A quick, easy way to be able to set up. Like the Ratchet wasn't very hard to download. I found it on GrabCAD, downloaded it, positioned it basically where I wanted to start. Doesn't have to be perfectly exact. It's really just for the visual. But if you are, and you do need it to be exact, of course you can do that within Fusion 360. So, and that's basically our workflow of setting up an animation inside of Fusion. We can always change the storyboard name. I can right click and I could say, rename it, whatever I'd like the storyboard to be. And there's a couple different things too when you do things like exploded views, right? So if I wanted to explode something, I can make a new storyboard, and we do have the capability of having exploded views, right? So in here, if I chose to transform, and I can do an auto explode, which will explode the assembly as it was built. You can explode at all levels, so your sub-assembly levels, your bolts and nuts and so forth will explode out. There's also the manual explode, right? So you could take it exactly like we did before. I could transition this along that Z-axis, and I can explode it out, right, the way it would be built and so forth. And I could take the next component and I can explode that out, right? So I just say another manual explode, and now I could transform that within the explode. So this can transform out along any of those axes, and you could do the exploded views as well directly within Fusion, right? So let's say this one's going to transition in here, and maybe I'm going to transition that jaw out and just kind of walk through that exploded view. If you want to add your extension arrows and lines, it'll do that as well. And you can manually explode your assemblies out, right? So this way, and that kind of gives you that workflow in here. And again, I can go back in time and I can see it gives me those moves the way it would explode out in my assembly. So just to give you an idea, you can make as many spoil boards as you like and try them. And especially where it came to the end of this transition where I might want to do something in the control, and you can even animate that as well, right? So you could show and highlight different buttons being pushed and so forth. You could do that and even animate a video inside an animation, which is kind of interesting, but you could do things like this. And you probably would need some other authoring software to make it more professional looking. But these are ways that you can work directly in Fusion. So with that, that's really the workflow I wanted to go through with you guys today. Throughout our design, being able to have different ways to transition through and make up an assembly. And so hopefully that's been helpful for you guys today. I know we had Devin on manning the questions inside of our um, YouTube live today, and hopefully there weren't any big questions that popped out. And awesome. So Devin, he's been chatting with me inside of our Slack, and if there's any big questions you guys might have, he had some questions about the toolbox files. You guys want the tool chest from the video from the um, sheet metal workflow from a few weeks ago. So let's do that. We're going to pin. I have the basic files for making that assembly, and we can pin them directly in that video. So look out over today and tomorrow, and we're going to add that directly, a link that you can download them from our Autodesk 360 directly so you can get all the assemblies and parts. So awesome. Yeah, sorry about that. I meant to load them up there, and we do have a tool chest, a simplified version that you can download and walk through that workflow. So we'll have that up over the next day or so. Awesome. Awesome. Looks like there's no other outstanding questions. And again, hopefully this has been a really helpful video to walk you through and hope and with my hope it opened up some ideas on ways that you can communicate some of the important aspects of when you do your machine setup to the operators, or even think of this as like a training video for guys that were new in your shop to go through, and they could just watch the videos and know exactly how to set it up. As I'd mentioned, you can put the videos directly on the Haas Next Generation control, and you can make a quick link to it so that the operator can walk through and see exactly how to set it up. So it'll eliminate mistakes. It could be used to help you with your ISO 9000 certification. So this way you're documenting everything you do and doing everything you document. So these are ways that help your shop grow, and hopefully it'll help make it more accurate when it comes to programming and machine setup. So with that, we like to make sure you guys are able to join us. And I mentioned in the beginning of our demonstration today that we have other workshops and other um, live streams that are happening all during the week. So on Mondays, it's Devin and myself, and we switch back and forth, and we will have some guests in the future. But some good workflows, hopefully, like today was a good workflow that will help you guys out. And Tuesdays, it's design and engineering. On Wednesdays, electronics with Edwin and Jorge. Brad is on Thursdays going through a lot of really cool projects that he's working on, and CJ and Al are on Friday. So tune in. Keep an eye on what's happening with our live streams. We do have some extended live streams like the manufacturing extension and what's new there, what's coming in drawings within Fusion 360. Keep an eye on live streams that are supporting what's new, and these are ways that you can keep the latest info and stay right on the edge with Fusion 360 and what's happening as we're getting into the future. So guys, with that, thanks for joining us, and stay tuned, and you're going to see a lot more in the near future.